Hey guys, it's Kasara, and today I'm going to be doing my mid-year reading goals check-in. So it's about the middle of the year. It's a little bit before the middle of the year, but I generally stopped doing my reading goals right before December. So it's about the middle of my reading goals year, if that makes sense. So let's see how far I'm into them. So in this video, we're gonna take a look at the reading goals that I made in December of last year for 2020, see if I'm actually following them and how on track I am. We're gonna make any adjustments depending on if I'm too far ahead of them and I probably need to be maybe a little bit more aggressive in my goals, or if there's no way I'm gonna meet this goal and we should slide it back a little bit. I'm also gonna look at like my priorities from 6 months ago and see if I have any new priorities that I would like to make new reading goals for the second half of the year. So this should be interesting. So I grabbed my iPad so we can take a look at the video from last year. So let's get into it. All of the goals that I'm planning to set for 2020. They're a little bit different and they're like not the typical like booktube sort of goals that you would expect. So last year I wanted to read more variety and I wanted just to read more books. For 2020, I'm planning on actually reading less books. Like I said, 252 books this year so far and counting, but I just feel like I didn't necessarily read everything that I wanted to read. I forced myself a lot to read books that I didn't necessarily want to read, whether it's for readathons or reading challenges or anything like that. So I want to read more of what I want to read. Specifically, that's gonna be fantasy, but I'm not gonna push myself to read quantity as much, and I'm going to push myself more to read like what I really want to read and be a little bit more moody in my reading rather than very following strict TBRs. So next year, I'm gonna limit all of my TBRs to 12 books or less. Also, I will be still putting one classic every month on my TBR. Additionally, last year during the middle of the year, I wanted to start adding one reread every month in addition to like my December rereads, which it wasn't really a yearly goal because I set it like in the middle of the year. I didn't do a very good job of following it, but I'm gonna be putting one reread every month on my TBR as well. So that takes up. So limiting my TBRs to 12 books or less kind of worked and kind of didn't. I did do the limit of 12 books or less. That didn't make me follow my TBRs any more than I typically do. And I'm still reading just as much as last year. I'm not quite just as much. I think I'm averaging out about like 19 and a half books a month this year so far, while last year I averaged out at 21 books a year, so I'm reading a little bit less, but not significantly. So one reread a month, we're doing well with that. In fact, I did way more than one reread a month, so yeah, that's definitely going very well. Second goal, like I said earlier, I'm going to continue my Unwrapped book challenge. It's just going to be for 24 books in the entire year between January and November, and it'll be one book every 2 weeks. So we got to talk about my Unwrapped book challenge. Yeah, it's not been going great. For most of them, I will say I did try to read the books. For those of you who don't know, my Unwrapped book challenge is I have a bunch of books that I'm considering unhauling, but I wanted to give one last chance before I unhauled it. And so I wrapped them up and put them on my shelf so I can't see them. And then I have to unwrap 2 books a month. And if I don't read them that month, then I have to unhaul them. And it has not been going well. I followed the Unwrapped book challenge pretty well through March, but April and May just didn't happen. And we're halfway through June and I haven't started either of them yet in the month of June. So I don't know how the Unwrapped book challenge is going. I may just like cancel it and just unhaul all of my Unwrapped books, because right now, even like the majority of the ones that I read, I either didn't like or unhauled anyway. So it's not going so great this year. I remember last year it went really, really well. This year, not as much. And lastly, my third reading goal for 2020 is going to be a new reading goal, and I'm calling it my Fantasy Book Series Challenge. Are these really the only reading goals I did? I swear I did more reading goals than this. So I have this cup right here with 24 fantasy series in it that I've been meaning to read for the longest while. January went really, really well. Didn't love the books, but it went really, really well. I read both of the books and I decided to not continue on with one of the series. I decided to continue on with the other series, but I haven't gotten to it yet. February went really well also. I got to both of the books. One of them I really liked, one of them I didn't like as much, but I decided to continue on with both of those series. And I finished one of those series, the other one I haven't continued on yet. March, I absolutely loved both of the books that I picked out. And I've decided to continue on with both of those series. One, I decided to kind of like put on hold because there's like a huge time gap between the first two books. I am gonna continue on with that series, but I'm gonna wait till next year. The other one, the second book in that series, is on my June TBR, so I'm definitely gonna be continuing on. And I'm super excited about it. So let's take a look at April. So 3 out of the 5 months so far that I've done were successes. So April is where I failed. So technically, my fantasy book series challenge is just to start the book and decide if I'm gonna continue on with the series. I never said anything about finishing the book. So in April, technically I did start both of the books. I got like a significant portion of the way, like about 20% of the way into one of them, but I fell into a reading slump, so I put it on pause. I do think I like the book, but I haven't gotten super far into it, and I do want to continue on with the series and to finish that book as well. The second book I started, but like I said, I was in a reading slump, so I read like the first few pages and I'm just like, I'm not in the mood for this right now. So that one is kind of a fail. That one's kind of a fail. The first one was kind of a fail too, because I really did want to finish each of the books, not just start them, but yeah. It's not going so well in April. Let's take a look at May. May I did a little bit better. So I did finish one of the books. I didn't finish it in May. I started in May. I finished it in the first week of June. But like I finished it. I liked it. I plan on continuing on with it. The second book, I was waiting for the audiobook to come in for me in May because if you guys didn't know, I was in a reading slump in May. So like I wasn't physically reading things. I was mostly just listening to audiobooks. So I just got that audiobook. So I plan to get to it. But I also have to get to my June books first. So I'm behind by 2 books on my fantasy book series challenge, and I haven't started either of my June books either, and we're halfway through June. So we're gonna say I'm behind 3 books for my fantasy book series challenge. But that's better than my Unwrapped book challenge, so it's not a win with this one either. But I think this one I can catch up and meet this goal by the end of the year, in which case, unlike my Unwrapped book challenge, which I really don't see myself meeting the goal of 24 books by the end of the year. So yeah, so that's all I have for you guys. Okay, so apparently I was not being super ambitious this year, and I just had those 3 goals, which was the 1 classic, 1 reread, which I do normally, and then the Unwrapped book challenge and the fantasy book series challenge. I do a Goodreads reading goal, which is like the number of books I plan to read the entire year. So my Goodreads reading goal that I set last year was 120 books for this year, which by the way is about half of what I read last year. Last year I read 253 books, but I was like, I'm gonna read a lot less next year. I'm just gonna read books that I'm gonna love. And yeah, that didn't work. I still read a lot. I set the goal of 120, so let's check Goodreads. So this is my Goodreads reading challenge. Oh, 107. I literally just finished a book. So as I was gonna say, it was gonna be 106, but I actually finished a book between the time I planned this video and started filming it. So I read 107 of 120 books, which means I am 53 books ahead of schedule, which is a lot. I do count December for my Goodreads reading goal just because I do read in December. It just happens to not be new books. So I'm about 5.5 months into the year and I'm 53 books ahead of schedule. So we're gonna have to increase this. I think I'm gonna stick to what I wanted to do last year, which was the 12 books a month. Just I'm gonna increase my current 107 by 12 books a month for 6.5 months. I got 6.5 months. Click here. 6.5 times 12 is 78 books plus the 107 I've already read. Puts me at 185. I think 185 is a decent goal. So I'm gonna move my goal up to 185 on Goodreads. That's gonna be my new Goodreads reading goal for the end of the year. I think it is ambitious enough without being overly ambitious, because if I do have a lot of things going on at the end of the year, which I know I will, because I know there's a lot of things going on specifically with my job, because I'm going to be moving locations and like different things like that, I don't want to pressure myself, especially if I want myself to read more books that I will love, rather than right now I'm reading a lot of books that I won't love. So another thing that I wanted to look at a little bit were some of the changing priorities that I had. So in January, when I did my January wrap up, I added a lot of new stats. And in my January wrap up, you can kind of see I don't read very diversely. At least I didn't in January. But I want to read more diversely moving forward. Specifically, one thing I've noticed is I read a lot of high fantasy books, adult high fantasy books. The genre is just saturated by authors who are white men. What I want to do in the second half of the year is I want to read more high fantasy by female authors, adult high fantasy by female authors. So I don't know exactly how I'm gonna do this. So I already set my theme for the month of July to be fantasy by female authors, not specifically high fantasy by female authors, but just like fantasy by female authors. So I think what I'm gonna try and do, I'm gonna add on like my classics and my rereads, one book a month also that is a fantasy book by female authors. So that's already set for July with the poll that you guys did. I'll be reading one of those books, but I also want to set, starting in August onwards, I'm gonna read at least one book every month that is a fantasy book by a female author, an adult fantasy book by a female author, because it's really easy to get YA books by female authors. It's a lot harder to get adult books by female authors. And for this, I'm gonna search for epic fantasy. If I don't get epic fantasy, then I might do something along the lines of like, you know, The Night Circus or like 10,000 Doors of January, like something, while it's not like urban fantasy, it's also not epic. I don't know how to explain that. It's like in our world, but not like significantly like urban fantasy, because I really don't like urban fantasy. And there's also plenty of women that write urban fantasy, so I feel like that's not really going outside the box at all. Anyways, that was kind of like a weird goal. So I am setting one new goal of adding one adult fantasy book, preferably epic fantasy book, by a female author every month. And I updated my Goodreads goal to 185 books. I'm continuing on the course of my fantasy book series challenge. I think I can still meet it. The Unwrapped book challenge, I'm gonna continue on for now, just because I do still have so many unwrapped books. If it doesn't do well, I'm going to set a date, I think sometime in October. If I'm still not on track by mid-October, let's go by mid-October, then I might just resolve it and just stop doing unwrapped books. We are going to decide in October. The reason why we're deciding in October also, one, it's like a good 5.5 months away or so, because apparently 5.5 months is like the amount of time that I like to give things. But also because when I first started my Unwrapped book challenge, it was in October of 2018. So it'll give it a full 2 years. And we'll see. Maybe I'll like it, maybe I'll hate it, because it hasn't been super successful for me. But I thought this video was interesting. I hope you guys did too. I post videos on Sundays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, so consider subscribing. I also post bonus videos, so if you want to be notified as soon as I upload, you can click that little bell icon. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!